This is my friend Scott Aspelin. Scott is a financial coach and cares about pastors, has a special calling for that. He's worked many retreats with me, and I'm really thrilled that he's here today and that we get to that you get to engage with him and hear from him on these next few videos. Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself and your calling.
Sure. Well, like you said, yeah, I'm a personal finance coach, so I get to work with folks on their personal part of their finances. Everybody probably thinks, well, all my finances are always personal, right? Well, yes, but the stuff I'm thinking about that I work with these folks on is whether it's your learning to save more, learning how to get out of debt, learning how to budget, all those different things, but all of it really comes around changing. A lot of times it's changing or making the most of your relationship with money and really focusing on some of that personal side too. We don't want to leave that personal side out and just get to the numbers, but it's that meshing of the two things. And then with, like you said, with the pastors, I do really have a heart for working with pastors as well. It took several years of, before I even got into financial coaching, just a challenge from a previous church leader who had, asked me I was going through a job change, and he said, hey, it'd be really good if you figure out what your vocation is going to be. I never really heard that word much and really had a lot of time to pray about it. I cycle, so it's my alone time. And, really felt that the word I kept getting was pastoral care, like literally caring for pastors. And I came back to him with it, and I said, what do you think about this? He said, I think you need to pray about it some more. I'm like, okay. Well, and then 3-4 years later, when I was doing financial coaching, and then another actually previous pastor of mine put me in touch with you, put us together, and now my financial coaching and the pastoral care get to come together. So it's a really cool combination of the two now. So yeah, I do love doing that.
It's a beautiful convergence, and it's helping pastors that I know, and I'm grateful for that. So Scott, you have a unique approach as you begin your financial coaching. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, as I alluded to, I do like to focus on I've heard, I didn't come up with this quote, but someone said, personal finance is far more personal than finance. And I definitely agree with that. So because of that, I like to talk about some of the emotions and behaviors first. So I actually start really, really kind of base level with anybody I meet with. And I usually ask them, I said, when I say the word money, just what comes to mind? Just completely free form.
I bet you get some interesting answers.
I got some really interesting answers over the years, but you can imagine some of the more common ones, like people say, they'll say very practical things like, paying bills or saving or retiring, all those kind of things that we
stress.
Exactly. Because if they don't say a feeling or emotion, then I will follow up with a question and say, okay, well, specifically, what feelings or emotions come to mind when you think of money? And you're right. Stress is the top one that comes to mind. Anxiety, fear. There's a lot of different emotions people have with money, and I'd like to just start the conversation that way, because then we will actually start to delve a little bit more into some of the things about what we believe about money and what thoughts we've had, whether we know we have them or we, they're kind of subconscious.
So thinking about emotions, relationship with money, what are some of the other emotional dangers you see?
Really good question. Probably the one that not everybody has this, but I think a lot of us encountered this one. Myself, I definitely have and still do. I'm going to put it under the topic of comparison. I'll leave it broad like that to start with, because what I mean by comparison is as humans, we're just wired to compare. A lot of it's subconscious. It's just very much behind the scenes, but we're wired that way to compare what someone's wearing, compare what someone's driving, compare with where someone lives, compare what they're eating, all these different, compare what they look like. But just when it comes to, I'm just thinking about how that will then to start relate with our finances, because we're sort of talking about that. And with comparison, that really kind of goes into what I would call this with success. And I've yet to meet someone, hopefully I don't, but I haven't met anybody yet who said, you know what, Scott, my goal is to be a total failure in life. No, most people want to be successful at whatever they're doing, whatever success means for them, but they want to be successful. Well, to be successful, then that kind of moves into, in our U.S. American culture, it's so ingrained, not only being successful, being the best, winning. Well, to be the best or to be winning means someone else has to be not the best or less than. And I think sometimes this is kind of some ugly truths about my life and how this has come out. And I've seen this play out with probably more people than would like to admit. But when I was really truthful about, okay, when I'm comparing these things, whether it's that stuff with the hobby that I buy, or that house that I buy, or that car that I buy, how do I feel when I see someone else who may have what I think is a lesser car or a lesser home? What emotions are going on in my mind? Do I start to feel, oh yeah, I'm pretty successful. I'm doing really good. And that desire for success can really start to grow and multiply. And what that can play out with, I see, unfortunately, a little too often, is that then that will morph into, okay, well, I'm buying this thing to look a little more, maybe get this watch because the people who have this will look a little more successful. And I'm going to dress a certain way around my coworkers or even at church or wherever, just to look a little more successful. And you can be fake successful in our society. You can look that way. And that's what's challenging is you see somebody, you don't really know what's going on behind there. You see outwardly they may dress a certain way, drive a certain car, and live in a certain house. We don't know if they're buried in debt with that, but they can have an air of success, and how easily it is in our culture to also play into some of that. And so I've had to really, again, come to some realizations about some ugly truths about me, is that it wasn't just about me looking a little successful. It was actually about me being better than this person. That was painful for me to come to, but I challenge those who are watching the video just to say, is there maybe an air of that where when you feel successful, is your feeling of success meaning that someone else has to feel less than? And how that plays out with some of the ways we spend our money and what we spend our money on.
You know, in the pastoral relationships and in my own life and thinking of myself, it may not be about being more successful or better than in that way financially, but it could be, well, I'm more faithful or I'm more spiritually mature,
Right.
And that relationship or that way of being with other people or viewing other people may affect my relationship with money.
It absolutely could. Yeah.
So once a person talks about their feelings or something about their relationship with money, where do you go from there?
Well, yeah, because it has been a relationship they've had almost their whole life. They may not always realize it, but you start to have that relationship with money as a young child. You're watching people around you, usually your parents or whoever you were raised around, and you're observing them do things with money and how they interact with money, and that's unbeknownst to you, but that's how you're starting to form some of your thoughts and feelings on money. So we start to go back. I'm not a licensed therapist, but we do want to get some of the questioning out about, hey, let's think back to some of your early formative times or thoughts about money.
And so a portion of our relationship with money that we have right now is influenced by our childhood, you're saying?
I've definitely found with myself, for sure, it's been that way. Let's say someone as a child was let's say they had like 10 or 12 kids in their family, big family, and they're lower in the birth order maybe. So maybe they were number 11 or 12. Well, that particular child probably didn't have a lot of new clothes as a young person, and that some of those things will start to affect them to where I've coached someone before. She was she was a little bit older. She was past middle age at this point, but she was the last in the birth order of a large family, and she indicated, yeah, she had a lot of hand-me-downs. And I said, now, so when you go buy clothes now, I said, how does it, just walk me through how that happens. She said, well, every piece of clothes I buy now has a new tag on it. That affected her. Now, that's her choice, and she's willing to trade off other things in her budget, which we'll get to that in other videos. But that affected her because she never had that new piece of clothes. She never felt proud about that particular thing for her. Other people don't mind hand-me-downs, but you can think of other people who have grown up perhaps in either, you might have had a parent or grandparent that grew up in the Depression era. That was a very formative time in their lives. And if you think, most commonly people think of somebody who grew up through the Depression, it's like they save everything. They don't waste anything. It affected how they think about money and how they think about finances. And then most recently we had with the financial crisis in 2008, there were people losing their jobs, losing their homes. So if you're either that person or you're the child of that person, those were definitely formative times, and they're all depositing. Those are experiences we've had with money, and they're all shaping how we now start to think and how we react and interact with money.
So I noticed you using the word formative, which I like. Do you find that people's relationship with money is more formed or influenced as a child, or is that a lifelong process?
I definitely think it's a lifelong process. I'm still, just because I coach people now doesn't mean I have it all figured out. I'm still forming and realizing ways that I interact with money and how I think about it. So I definitely agree. While it's definitely being shaped even before we sometimes realize it, it definitely can be continually shaped, and it can be shaped to where if we want it to go a little bit different direction. I think there's still obviously hope and encouragement for that too, because I've seen that in my life, different ways I've been able to adjust how I relate with money and then how that's worked out in actual dollars and cents in some cases. Think of a little clock. So at the top at 12 o'clock, write experiences, then come around, go the right direction, come around, and you're going to write beliefs and identity in the next, like at 3 o'clock, and then come down to that 6 o'clock, and you're going to write actions, and then you're going to come up to the 9 o'clock, and you're going to write results. And this is not something that Scott here came up with, but you can use it in many ways in your life. But we've all had experiences in life, just on many things. And those experiences, as you go around that circle, those experiences have shaped our beliefs, and actually then those beliefs will start to shape our identity. Those beliefs then lead to the action we will take in a certain circumstance. Now, after some action, there's always going to be a result, maybe a good one or a bad one in whatever we're looking at. And then that result will fuel back to either it'll actually reinforce that experience we've had, or it could potentially change it and steer away. So that cycle is going on in our life in many different ways. But I like to kind of point that out because so often in our culture, especially in America, is we like to say, well, I've had this experience of someone may say, well, I don't do good with my money, or I'm not good budgeting or something like that. And they'll say, tell me what I need to do. And and that's skipping past the identity, your belief and identities piece. They want to skip right down to tell me the actions I need to take. And when we take that one out of the equation, we're doing ourselves a disservice, I believe. Because we've got to address what those beliefs and identity are, because that is shaping what the actions are.
What the actions are.
Yeah.
So two perhaps counterintuitive moves as you're looking at our relationship with money and how we're formed is not just jumping straight to the action, but looking at those internal beliefs that came from our experiences, because experiences shape our beliefs, and then beliefs shaping our identity.
The psychologists, who are a lot smarter than Scott here, have found that true behavior change is identity change. That's when you truly have changed. Think of someone who might be a smoker, who was a smoker, and if someone offers that person a cigarette, they say two responses could come up. That person could say, "No thanks, I don't smoke." Another response could be, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." Well, they sound like the same answer, like, well, they're not taking a cigarette, right? But in the first one, if they said, "No thanks, I don't smoke," they don't identify as a smoker. And the second one, if they say, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit," well, they're trying to do something that's contrary to that identity. They're still identifying as a smoker, but saying, "Well, I'm trying to quit." And identity, what I've found, is so powerful because it's who we are. And I think it's possible to change our identity. A common example of when I was talking about experiences earlier is someone may say, "Well, I need to lose 10 pounds." Okay. They'll say, "Well, I just need to go to the gym." That's what people do when they want to lose weight. That's just the thing I need to do. Instead, what they may want to do is adopt the identity of a fit person. And then when you have that identity, saying, okay, well, if I'm a fit person, what does a fit person do? Well, a fit person might have a kale salad for lunch. I don't know. A fit person might count their calories. A fit person might take the stairs instead of the elevator. A fit person might go to the gym a couple times a week, whatever. They start listing the actions of what does a fit person do? Because they say, I am a fit person. This is who I am. That's my identity. And then you start listing the actions to do that. So in the same way, if someone is struggling financially, I work with them to say, what's your identity? What's your current identity financially? And then what do we want to turn it into? And then we can start listing those actions. And then when you do enough of those actions, kind of like a teeter-totter, when you get enough of those votes towards like that fit identity or something like that, enough of those things, then you've become that. That's who you are. So I do like that angle because it's again, working with people who have studied our human minds a lot more than I have, and tapping into some resources and ways of helping with finances that are ways that are proven in many ways of our life already.
So I hear identity is very powerful, and then you've got some ways to help coach us into actions, which actually, what I'm hearing you say, help us to believe what we're living into, what we're acting into.
Yeah. It's a process. It's never, especially with personal finance, it's never a snap your fingers or I'm just going to wish it into being. It's a process, and it's a continually putting those votes in towards that new identity, if that's what a person is trying to do. And the more and more of those votes you do, you will become it. So, if you don't mind, I'll share a story of my financial identity and
Please.
how it kind of shifted. Where I had a, earlier in my life, I'd had an identity where I was kind of basically wanted to always have the fun house that people wanted to hang out. We started to fall into this mode of always want to have the fun house. I was taking out large amounts of debt to do this hobby, and then it turned into now getting a different house, moving to a different house to be able to do this more. And then after many more years, then upgrading the equipment. And again, this was not all on cash. There was a lot of debt involved with this. And then going to even a bigger house in a different area. It's like it just kept going and going and going.
Because of an identity.
Because I had this identity of and again, I didn't have the framework at the time, but then now looking back, it's like I was totally doing that. And it was something I was striving for, to say, well, I have this fun house and we can do all this stuff there and people can just enjoy hanging out here. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, by no means. But it had turned into an identity that I was just striving after and striving after. So it wasn't until my wife and I finally sat down and said, okay, nowhere when we first got married and all these kind of things, and we were saving a little bit of money, but we always said, who we really want to be is people who, in our early 50s-ish, have the freedom and flexibility to do other things. Some people may call that early retired, but we said that's what we really have always wanted to be. But this other thing was not that. There was money going out big time, and in debt. It was all this stuff. It was not what we wanted. So we said, okay, this is who we're going to be now. So that's our identity. Now we start asking that question: what does a couple or a family do who's going to have that freedom and flexibility in their early 50s to do other things? So we said, okay, well that person probably has to get rid of some of these things with the hobby. So I sold that stuff. Then we also had to realize, well, we need to start saving some money. If we're going to have this is up to us. So it got to where, well, a person who's going to have this identity of having that flexibility at that age, we probably need to save 20, 30, 40. We got up to where we're saving over 50% of our income. This was over a process of years. This was not a, hey, Scott and Cherie snapped their fingers and all was magically cured. No, it was a process. It was a daily having these votes. And then those choices, someone who's going to save that, we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, would a person who has this identity, would they go out to eat 4 times a week, or would they go out to eat 1 time a week? Those are some choices we had to be, confronted with. Or I was working in an office, traditional office at that time. Would a guy who's trying to do that, would I go out to lunch with my coworkers, or would I bring my lunch? I actually chose to bring my lunch. For 20 plus years, I brought my lunch. The same lunch, that's a different story. I can be very consistent on things, but yeah, that was how identity in my own personal life really had to shift around just from a financial perspective. But there was some other identity in there, and it was really affecting our finances.
So perhaps a good closing question for us to consider is, what is my financial identity? And then, what do I want my financial identity to be?
That is absolutely a great question, because and a way to start to look at that is you may start thinking, okay, if there was such a thing as a financial detective, came with a little magnifying glass and started looking at how you spend your money now, where that money goes, that would start to shape what your identity might be. And then it's a matter of shifting and saying, okay, well, what do I want my identity to be? And it's usually a short statement, like the one I said. It was a short statement, just to say this is who I'm going to be. So you can be reminded of that and say, yeah, I'm making this choice because this is who I am. Because it's a whole different thing to say this is what I want to be versus this is who I am. And just some of that speech it really starts to affect how we think and how we make decisions. And it really will start to make a difference. I have to be realistic. It will take time. But that process is a great place to start with it.